Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. We are here to look back and reflect on the year in reading so far in 2026. Specifically my reading, but if you want to share your reading year, please feel free. That's why we're here. That's why we all love hearing about what everybody's doing in reading. That's what's so great about this community where we can talk about books with each other. So do feel free to comment on your bests and worsts and whatnot. So this, I think it's going to be very casual, chatty discussion. I've looked at some of my reading records and stats and stuff, but I don't think this is going to be anything overly formal. I also am not going to adhere to any specific one of the mid-year tags, so I think I'm going to hit the major questions, the hits from the mid-year book freakout tag of the best, what we all love. So let's start there, I guess. I think that this year has been my best reading year, potentially, both in terms of volume and in terms of hitting a lot of the qualities that I've been wanting to in reading and been struggling with. I feel like I'm having a lot of success in my reading this year. So I think we'll come back around to that, but start with the specific book stuff. So first, my bests, my favorites of the year. We'll split into fiction and nonfiction because I do read a significant amount of nonfiction. My favorite fiction is, for sure, A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. It's the second in the Wayfarers series, 2 of 4. And I read the whole series this year, pretty much back to back, because my in-person book club was reading this series and decided to continue with the whole thing. And I also buddy read this with Tiffany from Towering TBR here on BookTube, and it was a reread for Tiffany over this whole series. And that was just such a great experience to be reading it with other people and discussing. Tiffany, as a rereader, was picking up on little details that I was maybe missing and really enriched that experience. And it's also just such a joy to read this. It's sci-fi, but it's also very character-driven stories that feel kind of cozy, but not without stakes. And they're just these real diverse stories of how people, not necessarily human people, maybe alien people, are built by their experiences, by their past, by the environments that they're raised in, by the conditions of who they are. And there's just so many layers to these stories. And Closed and Common Orbit was my favorite. I think it has the most kind of intimacy to the characters because you're only following 2 characters, where the others, I think, have broader character lists. This one really gives you the time and depth to explore 2 characters who are very, very much different and outsiders, and I love that. Then my nonfiction favorite is The Field of Blood by Dr. Joanne B. Freeman. I loved this book, but it sounds like I shouldn't have, really. It sounds very grim. It's about violence in Congress, and it really tackles the topic of honor culture and the difference in perspectives and duty to their constituents between the North and South representatives in U.S. Congress during the couple decades lead up to the Civil War. And why it wasn't so grim, I mean, it has grim moments for sure, really difficult content, but why it was so easy to read and enjoy is that Joanne Freeman has a passion for history and delights in the history of it, and you can get that sense through the entire telling of this story. But also she made it very personable and connectable by telling the story from one man's perspective for the most part. She's filling in a lot of detailed information, but she took the journals of one man who was there present over the course of this, who started as kind of a secretary to Congress. And he wrote these detailed diaries where he's accounting for both the casual and the formal, and really gives this human perspective to what's happening and how he was experiencing it. And I think that was the right lens to approach this from. So I just loved it and want to read some more of Dr. Freeman's books for sure. Then I think, let's say, the most surprising book was Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove. And it shouldn't really be that surprising because it was all over the place after, I think, the Goodreads Awards had listed it. But it kind of came out of nowhere, and then everybody was really loving it. And I saw it on so many people's end-of-year lists last year, and that was why I turned to pick it up. So I should have expected to love it because so many people I know who have similar taste did, but it was not what I expected at all. This is a debut novel, And it's doing some things in terms of being an isolated ship in space type of story that I know and love. I really enjoy those types of stories, but this was doing so many fresh, bombastic, loud things in the monsters aspect and in the way it's being told from the perspective of ships' AIs. And it just felt very innovative and really memorable, for sure. And yet, as I said, this is a debut novel. And so I think that the author really was doing something interesting, and I will definitely be checking out the second book, not a sequel, but the next book that the author comes out with, which has already been announced. It's something with dolls. It looks pretty creepy, I think. So that was my most surprising. My most unsurprising that I did enjoy is Roadside Picnic by Boris and Arkady Strugatsky. And this was very unsurprising because I have been constantly recommended to read them, that people I know who know my taste say I will love them, and I did. I really enjoyed it. It really has connective tissue to stuff I have read and loved, but also has that classic sci-fi feel. You can feel the weight of it as a classic work, and that its influence has carried through other sci-fi. I loved that. I really enjoyed the type of storytelling and just the way it was executed, but it's just a good story. Like, I really, really enjoyed it. Even if I didn't enjoy the character too much, I really, really like this one. So I shouldn't have been surprised. It's been on my TBR many times, and I have always struggled and failed to get to it because I am terrible at whenever I assign myself things. And I guess that's a good place to pivot into the generalities of my reading year. My year is on track to be the best, most voluminous reading year I've had, in my adult life at least. And I think my previous very best year in terms of book count was 180 books. And this year so far, I'm at 97 as of the point where I'm filming. So by the end of this week, I'll be at 100. And that easily puts me on track to hit 200 total for the year plus. So that's pretty wild. That's a lot. Though I do spend a lot of my time reading, most of my time reading, and that's not too out of the realm of reason right now. But it also is interesting that I have done away with goals this year and am finding myself hitting a lot of things that I previously would have targeted as goals and failed or struggled at really, really hard. So kind of with what I was saying about Roadside Picnic, I assigned myself these things that I was recommended a lot, and then I just never got to them over the course of an entire year. And I feel like I've been reaching for those things that have been lingering on lists for a long time, have been moving to the front of my list this year. Or not list, but front of my mind. And so I've actually been reaching out and picking them up. Like Roadside Picnic, I literally just saw it in the library. I was like, I'm going to get to that right now. And I did. And that's not something I usually do. I always am somewhat of a mood reader, but usually I have somewhat of a backlog from the library just sort of sitting there. I also have been massively reading from authors I know and love, which is something I struggle with, and series. Those are two of my biggest struggles, and those have been big hits this year, which feels wrong. It feels very opposite of the way things should be working. So I kind of looked at stats, but not heavily for this, but for my backlist reading of authors I know and love already, I've read 40 books, which is huge. That's fantastic. I'm so happy with that. For series, this really surprised me. Like, I was shocked. I have read up to their current release, but incomplete series. I've read 9 series up to their current release. For finishing series that are completed, I finished 3. So that's 12 total that I have no more books available to read. That is wild to me. That's normally a full year of reading to hit that as something I used to set as a goal. And I would always struggle with and be racing to get at the end of the year. And I've done it without really trying. I have been very drawn to series. I have really fundamentally changed the way I'm reading series, where I have been, for the first time really ever, rereading from the beginning of the series and just catching all the way up. And that's not a way I've read before very much. I've been reading a lot of series pretty in close succession, so back to back to back. And that's also not a real big way I've read in recent history. And so that seems to be working for me, obviously. And I've fundamentally changed some things about the way I'm reading this year. And that is really, really interesting. So I feel those things are massive successes. I've been reading a lot of big books, but particularly in series big books. And I'm happy about that. I'm not leaning on small books to hit that high number because I very much don't have to because I'm reading so much. And a lot of the big books that I'm reading, I've not felt I need to rush through. I feel like I've been able to focus and give them time, and I'm really enjoying that. Like, I'm not worried about just reading them at their own pace. So that's been really wonderful. So I think those are the main highlights of my year. I think the one other sort of statty thing I would say is my nonfiction reading. I feel like that could come up. Like, I would like it to be maybe a third, but I'm at about 25% nonfiction. And I feel like that's really quite good. I'm pretty happy with that. And in fact, I'm in the midst of BookTube prize reading, which is I'm reading for the nonfiction side of the prize. So I think that will kind of naturally bring it up a little bit. Though I did get particularly heavy books, so those are taking a significant amount of time. So that might shift how things go as far as my nonfiction ratio. I think that all of that means my year is going great, and I feel like I don't need anything to change in the back half of the year for me to be really happy with this reading year. I think that the one thing I would like to see change a little bit is shifting more of my reading to what's on my shelves. Because of that desire to read from authors I know and love, to finish series that I want to read. I also want to reread books. This is my favorite shelf. And I want to reread some favorites, which is not something I spend a ton of time doing, but I would like to do some of it. I've really been having in mind some specific things that I just wanted to dive in and reread. And so I want to prioritize the stuff I have over stuff from the library, but I am such a massive library reader, and I love the wonder of discovery and browsing the shelves that I'm at my library a couple times a week very often. And so it's hard to let that go. And I do want to rebalance that a little bit, but I won't be upset if I don't. So I think that's where my second half of the year is going, but it may or may not. and I don't think it will affect either of us very much, depending on which way I go. So I think that's all I really had to talk about. This has been very informal, as I said, and very casual, but I'm so excited and hopeful about this year, reading-wise. It feels like unintentionally and without setting specific targets or working at addressing behaviors in my reading diet, I have really fixed a lot of the things that I was struggling with for many years that were the final holdouts in my reading behavior that I wanted to change. And that feels really, really good and hopeful for my year in 2026, when we maybe don't have a lot of hopeful things to hold on to. I feel like my reading life is definitely something that is a shining light in my current life for the year of 2026 that I can be happy about. So anyway, I'm very happy about my reading year. Please let me know what you think of your reading year this year. If you have a favorite book, let me know what it is down below. Maybe I will put it on my list to get to, probably from the library. But I love seeing recommendations for what other people are loving. So with that, I will say thank you so very much for watching.